What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video today here in Nostalgic Pixels. And this is a game that I have been thinking about playing for a very long time. And that is Pac-Man World 2 Re-Pac. But I was thinking about playing this game even before this remake that I'm going to dive into today. And that is Pac-Man World. As somebody who's been a big Pac-Man fan since I was a little kid. It was one of the first games that I really got into gaming. It started off with me playing Mrs. Pac-Man on the Sega Dreamcast. You know, I have this thing right here. I have the little mini arcade machines. But for whatever reason, and I even owned a GameCube, I never played Pac-Man World. I don't know why. I put a ton of hours into Mrs. Pac-Man on the Dreamcast, and then obviously playing arcades, as well as just the actual traditional Pac-Man game and Pac-Man Championships. I never got into the 3D platformer part of it, and that's very odd coming from me considering I love 3D platformers. It was one of my favorite genres, and to this day still one of my favorite genres. So when this game came out, it was a must grab for me, and I was really impressed. Look, I don't really have much to go base off of because I did not play the previous iteration of it on the GameCube back in the day, but if anybody who's interested into this game and has never played those originals, this isn't just nostalgia bait. I guess in a way it kind of is, but it is still a very underrated, really high quality 3D platformer. So if you're interested into a new 3D platformer that you haven't played for a while, this one might be the one for you. There's a lot of visual upgrades in this game, and it looks stunning, honestly. It looks really good. When I look at the comparisons of what it was on the GameCube and what it is now, they've knocked it out of the park in this remake. I love it a lot. And I'm glad it wasn't just a remaster. It was a full-blown remake. And I really hope this means that not just they're going to do Pac-Man World 3 Re-Pac, which most likely they will, because obviously they did on the first one, now they did the second one, which is considered the best, and the third one's kind of a from what I've understood. Maybe we might get a Pac-Man World 4. We've seen it with Crash Bandicoot. We haven't seen it with Spyro yet, but I hope it gets that Crash Bandicoot treatment where it gets an actual fourth brand new sequel into the franchise. So what's new exactly? So they've remade the cutscenes pretty much from the ground up. They've added voice actors and voiceovers. They're actually using the same voice actor from the original Pac-Man World 3. They brought him back to do Pac-Man World 2 and actually add voice lines to that. That kind of has some mixed receptions because, one, some people don't necessarily like the original voice actors. Some people thought that, hey, let's stay true to the game, let's not add any. For me, as a brand new person experiencing this game for the first time, I kind of like the voice acting. It does add a nice modern touch to it. And I'm not a big fan of games without voice acting. I like to see the voice acting. That's something that's always kind of bothered me about like Nintendo games, for example. It's like, hey, come on, let's add some voice acting. I would like to see that. Another thing that they added was a fairy mode. So I'm not going to lie, there's times where I had to use it. But this is really good because I will say this game can be, as you move up into the levels, it starts off fairly simple, but it can be a very difficult 3D platformer. And I've heard from a lot of people who played the original that they've never beat the game because it's just that hard. Because once you run out of lives, you reset and everything like that. So I think adding this new mode is pretty good because if you get to those levels where you're just constantly stuck, it's good to kind of have that little safety net because, like I said, I've had to use it at times. I'm very close to beating the game. I'm not quite there yet, but I wanted to put out this review. They've also completely redesigned the village. The village is pretty much brand new. They've added places where you can add specific statues that you get as you hit the drop thing, I don't remember what it's called, but basically little statues that you can use and you can place around your village. They've redesigned all that. They've added a bunch of different visualizations. It's a little bit more lively. They've added more people. They've changed the name of some of the characters in the village. And also, too, they've added extra levels, which I did not know this yet until later on, and somebody was telling me about this because I haven't quite beat the game yet. But after finishing the original story, you are gifted basically 6 new areas based on existing levels. So 6 new levels based on existing areas, I should say, because each zone has a specific theme, obviously, one being ice and snow, other being a volcano, others being like in the treetops, so on and so forth. And they've added a couple new areas once you complete the base game to that. Also, too, they're adding DLC to the game, which I actually think is pretty cool. I've never seen that before. Correct me in the comments down below if you've seen that, where they've actually added DLC to a remake. Obviously, like, this is not the first time we've seen remakes add like new levels and stuff, but the fact that they're doing like certain DLC is pretty cool, and it's combined with Sonic because of the new Sonic Crossworlds game, because Pac-Man will be making an appearance in a DLC within Sonic Crossworlds Racing, and Sonic's going to be making an appearance here in the Pac-Man World Re-Pac 2, or Pac-Man World 2 Re-Packed. And basically it's going to be heavily inspired Sonic theme, where you're going to be playing as Sonic was the blue blur, and you're kind of going through. It's going to be more like Sonic levels than it is Pac-Man levels. It's basically going to be like a little add-on for the game. But in total, there is 24 existing levels and 13 brand new ones. So if you consider the new levels that they're adding by default, as well as the DLC, there's a lot of new content to be had here. They pretty much increased the content by about 60%. So even if you're a fan of the original game, it's not like you're not just playing that in a brand new skin, but you're also getting a lot of new stuff. So pretty much by playing this, I could see why a lot of people were big fans of the original one. I mean, I can see why it left such an impression on those people, because it really is a good game. You look at the world of Marios or the Crash Bandicoots or the Jak and Daxters, some of the big franchises in the 3D platformer space, and this one does kind of get left behind, especially when you consider that Pac-Man is a massive brand. Obviously is one of the original games ever created by Namco. So yeah, I like the uniqueness of every level. It feels like every level is completely different and fresh. It doesn't feel the same. And then you have the different zones, which really cater into the uniqueness of that. Like, it's not just a snow world, but they wanted to include some of the aspects of snow and ice, like running away from an avalanche or skating and like all this different stuff. Or if you're in the jungle and you have the different trampolines, I like how they kind of stay to the theme, and each one feels unique. It doesn't feel like you're playing the same one over and over again. And that was some of the fear that I had, because when you tend to remake some of these older games, there wasn't a lot of I don't want to say there wasn't creativity, because it's not fair to say, but they were a little bit more simplistic in the way they did their level designs in more retro titles, versus now you can't necessarily get away with some of that stuff like you could back then, where we're a little bit more forgiving and fans are more forgiving. But this game is not like that at all. Each one is completely different, and I think that scale of difficulty is progressed pretty well. Like the first level, or first zone, and the first boss is relatively simple. You're going to gain a lot of health and a lot of lives. The second one, it gets a tad bit tougher, but you pretty much are going to not have too much of a trouble. You're going to come out on top with more lives. The ice one, I kind of feel the same way. Then once you get to the lava level, that's when stuff starts getting a little tough. I guess that's when I had to start utilizing some of the easy modes at times to complete some of those levels. I was able to go back and beat them on like regular difficulty, but the progression of how it gets difficult is pretty interesting, because a lot of 3D platformers don't really do that. A lot of them, they'll get more difficult in the boss fights, but the general gameplay loop stays about the same, and this one's not really like that. And I can see why back in the day a lot of people would really struggle to complete this game, especially 100% it. I would say so far I enjoyed the ice world the most, and I think a lot of people do. That's one of the levels that when you look back and people do these retrospectives of those games, that's the levels that a lot of people point to, because they are super fun. I think the ice skating levels are a blast to play, and I really enjoy them. They did add co-op to this game, so that's a little bit of a waste. I'm not gonna lie, I tried playing co-op with my girlfriend, but all the co-op player does is really just shoot dots. But reality, you don't really need them to do that, because all the dots do is stun the enemy, so you still have to go and kick them. And then also it doesn't really benefit, because it's not that hard to necessarily get the specific floating boxes that might be in the sky that you can use. So it kind of felt like a waste, and a lot of times like third person in second place, and the second player doesn't really have much to do. I will say too, in general, they've added a ton of quality of life changes, too much for me to even get into. I will leave a link down below of all the major quality of life changes and little things that they fixed. One of the big ones being like fruits magnetizing to you if you break a thing, versus before if you broke it and it fell, it was just gone forever. So there's the flip kick. There's a couple of things. I know when Pac-Man jumps, you're able to flutter and keep him alive, so he's not just immediately falling to the death. They have like a little circle where you can see where he's going to land. So a lot of little quality of life things like that benefit the player a lot. So like I said, I will leave a list down below of all those things if you want to look into that, if you're interested, if you're somebody who played the original and curious if some of those things that you had gripes with back in the day have been addressed here. Most likely they have. There's been a lot of thought and care that's been put into making sure they're creating a better experience, not just a remake, but a true better experience. Another aspect of this game that I really enjoyed was the arcade part of it, where it basically created a classic Pac-Man game, but in a 3D element. and it was just awesome to play. It was really cool to see and play Pac-Man in that dimension. It was pretty cool. It reminded me a lot of the original Mrs. Pac-Man on the Sega Dreamcast. But as somebody who, like I said, who is a big fan of the classic Pac-Man, being able to kind of play that on my own term in a new 3D environment was really cool to do. Another thing I really enjoyed about this game was the boss designs. The boss designs are really well done. Each one feels really unique in its own way. They both have their own little quirks about them and their own weaknesses, as well as their own certain attacks. It doesn't feel super repetitive in that sense, where as I'm playing it through the first time, I didn't really know what to expect for each boss fight, and trying to learn how to do that was really cool and interesting. Now, some people, this was a little bit of a controversy. Do they like the little helper thing? I will say, for someone like me, I kind of like the helper thing because, look, I play a bunch of different games. I kind of like it if a game just tells me what I need to do, but that's kind of a personal preference thing. Some people like to play and figure it out on their own. In a way, I kind of like to be told, hey, you need to do this. So now I know what to focus and do, especially in a game like this where, look, I could probably see in like a adventure game or an open world game where you're just there to explore and all this stuff. But like if I'm playing a 3D platform and I want to beat a boss, just kind of tell me how to beat it in a way. Like I just kind of want to go through the game. But like I said, that's a personal thing for me. It depends how you are. So you may not like the little helper, but at the end of the day, you could just walk right past him and not ask for his help. I know it's there by default, but hypothetically, you just zoom right past them, not look at it, and not pay attention. Overall, I just want to do my closing thoughts here. The replayability of this game is super well done. As somebody, even though I never played the original, I think somebody who was a fan of the original would absolutely enjoy this because there's so much new content to play, and the content that you haven't played before has been completely revamped and most likely a probably more fun way to do it. I will like to do another review of this after I go through the DLC and the new levels and create a brand new video just discussing that new content as well as the Sonic content that has been added to it. So be on the lookout for that. But anyways, if you like reviews of retro games, about not just retro games, but retro or classic franchises like Pac-Man or Mario, whatever, anything in the Nintendo verse or Xbox or PlayStation, whatever it might be, please feel free to like and subscribe. I'm going to be doing a ton more content just like this, covering old games that I've never played before and I'm playing them for the first time, or playing new games on classic franchises. So yeah, I hope to see you guys in the next one. Peace out, everybody.